The cold never bothered me before I got pregnant. Now it sits in my bones like it owns the place. I pulled my oversized hoodie tighter across my stomach and stared at the paper cup of barley tea going cold on the table in front of me. The cafe was warm enough. The problem was me. 5 months of carrying someone else's future in my body had rewired everything: my temperature, my sleep, my ability to sit in a plastic chair for longer than 20 minutes without my lower back filing a formal complaint. I was in Busan. Specifically, I was in a corner booth of a tiny cafe in Nampadong that smelled like roasted grain and old wood, the kind of place that had been here since before I was born and would be here long after I stopped mattering to anyone. I liked it for that reason. Nobody here cared who I was. My laptop screen blurred. I rubbed my eyes and forced my focus back to the translation doc open in front of me. Medical terminology, Japanese to Korean, due by 10 tonight. I was a freelance translator. I worked 3 contracts at a time to cover rent, food, and the growing pile of baby-related expenses that were slowly eating me alive. I was good at my job. I was also exhausted, underpaid, and approximately 1 bad week away from having a genuine breakdown in this very booth. My name is Noh Siwoo. I am 26 years old. I am 5 months pregnant, unmarried, and the biological father of my pup signed away every right he had the moment he saw the test result. He did it quickly too, like he had been practicing. I have a gift. That is the polite word for it. Since I was 12, I have been able to feel what other people feel. Not metaphorically, literally. The emotions of everyone within a few meters of me bleed into my chest like secondhand smoke. Grief, irritation, longing, guilt, I feel it all, whether I want to or not. On bad days, it feels like being buried under everyone else's weather. On good days, if I focus, I can push emotions back outward, amplify calm in a panicking room, drain aggression from a man with his fists already raised. I rarely use that second part. It felt like cheating. Also, it gave me headaches that lasted 3 days. Today, the cafe hummed with ordinary feelings. Mild boredom from the student 2 tables over. A low, pleasant warmth from the couple near the window who were clearly on a good date. The barista in the back had a headache and was quietly furious about it. I was so busy cataloging everyone else's emotional weather that I did not notice him walk in. Siwoo? The name cut through the cafe noise like something sharp thrown across a room. I knew the voice before I looked up. I had been knowing that voice for 3 years. I had also spent the last 8 months carefully restructuring my entire life so I would never have to hear it again. Cha Junyuk stood 3 feet from my table. He looked exactly the way I remembered, which was deeply unfair. Tall, sharp-jawed, wearing a coat that cost more than my monthly rent. He had a new haircut. He looked rested. He looked like a man whose life had continued without interruption. Beside him was someone I did not recognize. Male, polished, younger, with the particular expression of someone who was already calculating whether I was a threat. He decided I was not. I felt his dismissal like a small, flat stone, dropping into still water. I almost didn't recognize you. Junyuk's gaze dropped to my stomach and stayed there. Something moved across his face. Not concern, not guilt. Something I can only describe as entertained. My ability registered his emotions before my brain finished processing his expression. Surprise, yes, but underneath it, amusement. The particular brand of amusement that meant he was about to say something that would sound like a joke to everyone listening and land like a fist to the person it was aimed at. "You got big," he said. I picked up my barley tea and took a slow sip. "Hello, Junhyuk." No, seriously. He tilted his head, studying me the way someone studies an interesting problem they are glad is not theirs to solve. "I knew the divorce was hard on you, but I didn't think it would hit like that." The student 2 tables over glanced up. The couple near the window had gone quiet. "I'm pregnant," I said. "Not that it's your business. Pregnant." He repeated it like it was a punchline he was tasting. "By who? Also, not your business." Right, right. He nodded slowly, that smile staying exactly where it was. "I'm just saying, Siwoo, you really let yourself go. You used to be so careful. Remember when you wouldn't eat after 8? Now look at you." His companion laughed, quiet and quick, the sound of someone who understood the assignment. I felt the entire cafe shift slightly. That low, uncomfortable frequency of strangers registering that something cruel was happening, but not moving to stop it. And I felt something else. Something that had nothing to do with Junyuk or the cafe or anyone in the room. A pressure at the edge of my awareness, unfamiliar and sharp, coming from the direction of the street outside. 4 distinct emotional signatures, focused, controlled, and all of them pointed directly at this cafe like they already knew something I did not. I had felt powerful people before. Politicians, executives, men who ran things in the dark. But this was different. This was 4 people whose emotional presence hit the air like dropped frequencies, heavy and deliberate. The kind of calm that only exists in men who have made decisions other people spend their whole lives fearing. Junyuk was still talking. I had stopped hearing him. Because the door opened and the temperature in the room changed. Not from cold. From something older than cold, something that lives in the back of the human brain where instinct still runs the show. Every person in the cafe felt it. I watched them feel it without knowing why. I knew why. I just did not know yet what it meant. The door opened and 4 men walked in like the universe had personally scheduled them. Not rushed, not dramatic. Just steady the way a tide comes in. Like they had all the time in the world, and every second of it belonged to them. The cafe, which had been humming with ordinary Tuesday afternoon energy, went quiet in that specific way that has nothing to do with sound and everything to do with pressure. The student closed his laptop without realizing he was doing it. The couple near the window stopped mid-sentence. Even the barista with the headache went still behind the counter. I felt all of it. The room's collective nervous system firing at once. And then I felt them. 4 emotional signatures landing in my chest like separate instruments hitting the same note from different directions. I had never felt anything like it. Most people, even powerful ones, carried their emotions the way they carried their phones, loose, distracted, leaking at the edges. These 4 carried nothing loose at all. Their feelings were controlled, layered, deliberate. Like men who had learned a long time ago that letting the wrong thing show could get people killed. But I was not most people. And underneath the control, I felt everything they were actually feeling. The tallest one, who walked slightly ahead of the others, felt like a wall that had decided to become curious. Contained authority wrapped around something that surprised even him interest. Sharp recent pointed directly at my corner of the cafe. The one to his left carried the specific emotional texture of a man who was already 3 steps ahead of every other person in the room and was mildly bored by that fact. Except right now he was not bored. Right now something had snagged his attention and I felt him recalibrating in real time. The third one, broad-shouldered with the kind of stillness that comes from knowing exactly how much damage you are capable of, felt protective in a way that made no sense. He had been in the room for approximately 6 seconds. He did not know me, but his emotional frequency had already shifted towards something that felt uncomfortably like guarding. The fourth was the quietest, not in presence but in feeling. Where the others had layers I could peel, this one had a single surface of absolute calm sitting over something I could not quite reach. It was like pressing your hand against glass and feeling warmth on the other side without being able to get to it. I registered all of this in about 4 seconds. Then Junyuk opened his mouth again. Anyway, like I was saying, he had not even noticed the shift in the room. This was either extreme confidence or extreme obliviousness, and knowing him the way I used to know him, I had a strong opinion about which one it was. You should really think about what you're eating, for the pup's sake if not your own. You look tired, Siwoo. You look like you've given up. My grip on the paper cup tightened. Junyuk, my voice came out very calm. This was either personal growth or the fact that I was too tired for volume. You divorced me. You signed the papers, you kept the apartment, you blocked me on 4 platforms, including one I didn't even know you had. You used your right to never exist in my life again. I would really love it if you exercised that right now. His companion made a sound that was trying very hard not to be a laugh. Junhyuk's amusement flickered. Just slightly. I felt a small, sharp edge of something beneath it now. Not guilt. Something closer to embarrassment that was busy disguising itself as irritation. I'm just being honest with you, he said. Someone should be. Someone should also be somewhere else entirely. I smiled at him, sweet as barley tea. And yet, you're being defensive, I'm being accurate. There's a difference, and I think you know it. He shifted his weight. His emotional signature spiked with something petty and familiar. The specific feeling of a man who expected to win an argument who has just realized he might not. I'm trying to help. The lady asked you to move. The voice came from behind Junhyuk, not loud, not threatening in any tone you could technically point to. Just quiet in the way that very final things are quiet. The kind of quiet that does not need volume because it already owns the room. Junhyuk turned slowly. The tallest alpha stood approximately 2 feet behind him. Up close, his presence was even more significant. He was not physically intimidating the way people who are trying to be physically intimidating usually are. He was not puffed up or angled for confrontation. He was just there, completely still, watching Junyuk with an expression that I can only describe as professionally unimpressed. This is a private conversation, Junyuk said. His voice had changed slightly. He was covering it well, but I felt the shift in him, a current of unease moving under the surface. Who are you? The alpha did not answer that. He looked past Junyuk and looked directly at me. His emotional signature hit my chest like a hand pressed flat against a door. I cannot fully describe what I felt in that moment. because it did not make sense in any category I had a name for. It was not attraction, though my body filed some paperwork about that independently. It was not pity. It was not the professional calculation of a man assessing a situation. It was something rawer than all of those things. Recognition, maybe. The emotion of someone who has seen something and understands, somewhere below logic, that it matters. He held my eyes for 3 seconds. Then he looked back at Junyuk and said, "You're leaving." Not a suggestion, not a threat. A fact he was delivering slightly ahead of schedule. Junyuk laughed, the sound too sharp to be convincing. "I don't know who you think you are, but..." The other 3 alphas had moved. I had not seen them move. They had simply redistributed themselves in the space the way water redistributes in a container. And now 2 of them were flanking Junhyuk's companion, and 1 was positioned near the door, and all of it had happened so quietly that the café had not even registered a shift. Junhyuk registered it, though. I felt it the moment he did. His confidence did not collapse. It just quietly stepped out of the room and left a different feeling in its place. He looked at me one more time. Something moved behind his eyes that his mouth was too proud to say. "Watch yourself, Siwoo." "Always do," I said pleasantly. "Drive safe." He left. His companion followed. The door settled shut behind them, and the café exhaled. The tallest alpha was still standing at my table. His eyes dropped, just briefly, to my stomach, then back to my face. "Are you all right?" I looked at this stranger who had walked into a café in Nampadong and removed my ex-husband from the premises with the same energy someone uses to close a browser tab. "I was handling it," I said. One corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. The emotional equivalent of someone acknowledging a point without conceding the argument. "I know," he said. I watched. "Then why?" "Because you shouldn't have to." The café had resumed its background noise. The student reopened his laptop. The couple near the window went back to their date. The barista's headache was still there, but now it had company because mine had just started. 4 alphas, same café. All of them looking at me like I was something they had been looking for without knowing they were looking. My pup kicked once, sharp and definitive, against my ribs. I pressed my hand to the spot and thought very clearly, we are in so much trouble. My pup apparently agreed because he kicked again, softer this time, like a correction. Like he was saying not trouble exactly, more like, interesting development, pay attention. I pressed my palm flat against the side of my stomach and thought with great respect that my unborn child had terrible threat assessment instincts and we were going to have to work on that. The tallest alpha had not moved. He was still standing at the edge of my table, watching me with that same contained expression, the one that gave nothing away on the surface but underneath carried that same strange current of recognition I had felt when he first looked at me. His 3 companions had drifted into positions around the café that looked casual and were absolutely not. The one with the bored genius energy had taken the table directly to my left and opened his phone, but his attention was not on his phone. The broad-shouldered one was near the window, facing outward, watching the street. The quiet one with the glass wall emotions had settled at the counter and ordered something without looking at the menu, which meant he had been here before. I cataloged all of this in about 10 seconds. Then I looked back at the tall one and said, "You can sit down if you want. Standing over a pregnant man is a specific kind of energy and I'm not sure it's the one you're going for." Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise exactly, more like recalibration. He sat. Not across from me the way Junyuk had stood, positioned to loom and block. He sat at the edge of the booth, angled toward me but leaving space. The way someone sits when they want to make it clear that the exit is still yours to use. I noticed that. My ability noticed it too, filing it under. "Intentional. Kim Jaehan," he said. "Sorry, my name." He said it the way people say things they do not usually have to explain. "You looked like you wanted to know and didn't want to ask." I stared at him for a moment. I was actually thinking about my translation deadline. "Were you?" "Partially." I picked up my barley tea, remembered it was cold, put it back down. "Noh Siwoo." I know, that landed with a small thud. "You know," I repeated. "We've been in Busan 3 days. Jaehan's voice was level, unhurried, carrying the particular texture of a man who chose every word before it left his mouth. "You translated a pharmaceutical contract for a company that runs supply through our shipping network 6 weeks ago. Your name came up in the file review." I sat with that for a moment. "So you know who I am because of a contract." "I know who you are," he said. "Because your translation flagged an error in the original document that our legal team had missed for 2 years. You corrected it in a footnote, 1 sentence. Saved us approximately 400 million won in a customs dispute we didn't know was coming." The silence that followed, that was long enough to be its own small weather event. "You're welcome," I said finally. "That'll be extra." The one to my left made a sound. I turned to look at him, and he was definitely not looking at his phone anymore. He had the kind of face that looked like it rarely bothered with full smiles, the features too sharp and too composed for that. But right now, the corner of his mouth had done something involuntary, and he was visibly annoyed about it. Park Do-yeon, he said, without looking up from the phone he was pretending to look at. And before you ask, yes, I already pulled your full contract history. Yes, your rates are too low. No, that's not a compliment. It's a professional assessment. I didn't ask, I said. You were going to. I opened my mouth, closed it. He was not wrong, and I found that irritating. The broad-shouldered one had turned from the window. He crossed to the table without being invited, which should have felt presumptuous. But his emotional signature was so genuinely warm that the presumption landed like something closer to ease. He did not squeeze into the booth. He pulled a chair from the nearest empty table and sat at the end of mine like he had done it 100 times before. Yoon Tae-sung, he said. His voice was lower than I expected, softer too, sitting oddly against his size. Sorry about your ex. He seemed like a lot. He was significantly more than a lot, I said. He was, in fact, an entire situation. Taesung's mouth curved, genuine, uncomplicated, the smile of someone who had not learned yet to make smiling into a performance. His emotional signature was doing something that made my chest ache slightly, something that felt like protectiveness that had not been asked for and was not going away. I looked toward the counter. The fourth alpha had turned on his stool and was watching the table with those glass wall eyes. When he realized I was looking directly at him, he did not look away. Shin Yu-chan, he said. Quiet. Each syllable placed with care, the way you place something fragile on a surface you are not sure will hold. And what does Shin Yu-chan do, I asked, while the other three talk? Listens, he said simply. I felt the truth of that before he finished saying it. He was not quiet because he had nothing to offer. He was quiet because he was the one actually paying attention while everyone else performed paying attention. That distinction mattered, and I felt it land somewhere in my chest it had no business landing. 4 names. 4 sets of eyes on me in a cafe in Nampadong on a cold Tuesday afternoon when I was supposed to be finishing a translation and eating something that had actual nutritional value. I looked at the 4 of them. Kim Jae-in with his controlled recognition, Park Do-hyun with his sharp, unbothered assessment, Yoon Tae-sung with his unasked for warmth, Shin Yu-chan with his glass wall calm and his listening. My ability was doing something I had no clean category for. Usually when I read a room, I got a collection of separate signals, distinct emotional weather patterns overlapping without merging. But these 4, sitting around my corner booth in this old cafe that smelled like roasted grain in winter, were doing something different. Their emotions were not separate. They were layered, interconnected, the way instruments in a piece of music are technically individual, but only make full sense together. They were a pack, not just organizationally, biologically. The kind of bond that leaves a scent on every surface of a room, that makes the air in a space rearrange itself around a shared center of gravity. And their shared center of gravity right now was me. My pup kicked a 3rd time, harder. I looked down at my stomach and said, out loud in front of 4 Mafia alphas I had met 11 minutes ago, I know. I feel it too. Jaehyun's eyes moved to my hand where it rested against my side. Something crossed his face that he did not fully manage to contain. It was the look of a man who had just decided something without meaning to. I felt it like a door closing in a quiet house. Not shutting me out, shutting everything else out. I had felt a lot of emotions from a lot of people in my 26 years, grief so heavy it bent people at the spine. Joy so bright it was almost painful to be near. The particular exhausted relief of someone who had been strong for too long and finally found somewhere safe to put it down. But I had never felt someone decide something about me in real time and feel the exact moment the decision finished forming. Jane's emotional signature had shifted, not dramatically, not in any way visible on his face or his posture. But underneath the control, something had reorganized itself with the quiet efficiency of a man who identified a problem and immediately began solving it. The problem, apparently, was me, or more specifically, the situation around me. Or even more specifically, the fact that I was sitting alone in a cafe in Nampadong, 5 months pregnant, with cold tea and a translation deadline and an ex-husband who had just left the building wearing his cruelty like a good coat. I was not sure how I felt about being someone's problem to solve. I was also not sure how I felt about the fact that it did not feel bad. When did you last eat something, Do-yeon said, still looking at his phone. Today, I said. That's not an answer. Barley tea counts. Taesung made a sound that was either concern or the specific noise a person makes when they are physically preventing themselves from saying something. His emotional signature was doing the protective warm thing again, louder this time, and it was starting to make the back of my throat feel tight in a way I absolutely refused to address in front of strangers. "It does not count," Jahan said calmly. "What do you need?" "Excuse me, to eat. What do you want?" I looked at him. He looked back. His expression had the patience of someone who had decided to wait and had genuinely nowhere else to be. "I want to finish my translation," I said, "and then go home and eat whatever is in my refrigerator," which I will admit is a question mark situation right now, but still technically my business and not yours. "What's in your refrigerator?" Tae-sung said, with the focused concern of a man who had asked this question before to people he cared about. "Optimism," I said, "and possibly eggs." Yu-chan, still on his counter stool, made a sound so quiet I almost missed it. It was not quite a laugh. It was the sound a laugh makes when it is trying to stay professional and not fully succeeding. I felt his glass wall shift, just slightly, enough that I caught a thread of what was underneath it. Warmth, careful and contained, and clearly not something he deployed easily, but they're undeniably there, aimed in my direction like a small, steady light. I looked away from him faster than I meant to. Jahan had already flagged down the cafe staff. He ordered without consulting the menu and without consulting me, which should have been annoying and was, but the order he placed was doenjang jjigae with extra tofu and a fresh pot of barley tea, and I had been craving exactly that for 3 days without letting myself spend the money on it, so my annoyance had nowhere clean to land. "How did you know?" I said. "Know what?" "What I wanted." Jane's eyes moved to my face with the specific quality of someone who is not going to answer a question by answering it directly. "You've been looking at the table next to yours for the last 20 minutes. They ordered jjigae. That's observant. It's my job." "What exactly is your job?" I said. "And I want the real answer, not the version that sounds like a business card." The four of them did a thing. Not a look exactly, more like a micro-adjustment, the way a group of people who know each other extremely well communicate without moving their faces. Do-hyun's thumb paused on his phone. Tae-sung's posture shifted a degree. Yu-chan's eyes moved to Jahan and then back to me. Jahan said, "We manage assets and logistics across the southern port corridor." That is exactly the version that sounds like a business card. Something moved in his expression. The closest thing to caught I had seen on his face. "It's complicated." I translated pharmaceutical documents for a shipping company with 4 different corporate shells, 2 offshore accounts, and a footnote written in a dialect of legal Korean that hasn't been used in standard contracts since 2009, I said pleasantly. "I have a working definition of complicated." Do-hyun put his phone down. He looked at me directly for the first time since sitting down, and his emotional signature did something sharp and specific that I recognized after a moment as genuine respect. The involuntary kind. The kind people feel before they have decided whether they want to feel it. "He's not wrong," he said to Jahan. "About the shells." "I know," Jahan said. He stopped, corrected himself without being asked. "He's already figured out more than the last 3 contractors we vetted." "I know," Jahan said again. I looked between them. "I'm right here." "We know," all 4 of them said in varying tones at approximately the same time. My pup moved, slow and rolling, the kind of movement that meant he was shifting position rather than reacting. Getting comfortable, like he had assessed the situation and decided the threat level was low. The jjigae arrived. The heat of it hit my face before the bowl touched the table, and my body responded with an enthusiasm that bypassed all dignity entirely. I ate, not delicately. Not in the careful, performative way I had been eating in public since the pregnancy started. Always conscious of Junyuk's voice in the back of my head cataloging everything I consumed. I just ate because I was hungry, and it was good, and my pup needed it. Nobody at the table said anything while I ate. Nobody watched in that pointed way that makes a person self-conscious. They simply existed around me, the 4 of them, in that interconnected quiet that felt less like surveillance and more like something I did not have a clean word for. Safe, maybe, if I was being honest, which I was trying not to be. Halfway through the bowl, I looked up and found Tae-sung watching me with an expression so unguarded it startled me. His emotional signature was doing the warmth thing again, but underneath it now was something older and more complicated. Something that felt like recognition of a different kind than Jahan's. Not strategic recognition, personal. "You remind me of someone," he said quietly. "Someone good or someone complicated?" I asked. He thought about it with an honesty I did not expect. "Both." At the same time, I looked at him for a moment, felt the truth of it moving through his chest like water through a crack in stone. Old and real and slightly painful, and not something he had meant to say out loud. "That's either very sweet or mildly alarming," I said. "I haven't decided which." His mouth curved again. "Neither have I." The cafe had gone fully back to normal around us. The student was packing up to leave. The couple near the window were splitting a piece of cake. Outside, Nampadong moved through its ordinary Tuesday afternoon with complete indifference to the fact that my life had just pivoted in a direction I had not planned for and could not yet read clearly. I finished the jiggy, set down the spoon, looked at four alphas sitting around my corner booth like they had always been there. "What do you want?" I said. Not accusatory, just direct. From me specifically. Jahan held my eyes. His emotional signature was back to that organized, controlled surface, but underneath it, the current was still there. Warm and certain and moving steadily in one direction. "That," he said, "is a longer conversation. I have a deadline at 10, then we have time." I looked at Jahan for a long moment. My ability was doing that thing it does when multiple people in a small space are all feeling something significant at the same time. It built pressure, like the air before a storm, not unpleasant exactly, but impossible to ignore. Four distinct emotional currents all moving toward the same point with the quiet inevitability of water finding its level. I picked up my fresh barley tea and wrapped both hands around it. "All right," I said. "Talk." Jahan did not rush into it. He was the kind of man who treated silence like punctuation, something with a function rather than a gap to fill. He set his hands flat on the table, looked at me directly, and said, "We know about the custody filing." The teacup stayed in my hands, but my grip changed. "Which one?" I said carefully. Do-hyun glanced up from his phone. "The one Cha Jun-yuk filed 11 days ago claiming the pup is his and demanding genetic verification through a facility he personally selected." My stomach dropped in the particular way it drops when something you have been managing alone in the dark gets named out loud by someone who should not know about it. "How?" I said. "Our legal network monitors family court filings connected to anyone who has handled our contracts," Jayan said. "Your name was in the system. The filing flagged automatically. That is either very reassuring or extremely invasive." "Both," Yuchan said from the counter. At the same time, I turned to look at him. He was watching me with those careful eyes, the glass wall holding steady but the warmth behind it visible now, if you knew where to look. He had borrowed my own words back at me with such quiet precision that I felt the air between us do something neither of us acknowledged out loud. I turned back to Jahan. "The pup is not his," I said. "Jun-hyuk and I were already separated when I conceived. The biological father signed a legal waiver 6 weeks ago, witnessed and filed. I have documentation." "We know," Jahan said.
What's the problem?
"The problem," Do-hyun said, with the tone of a man explaining something to someone intelligent enough that he does not need to soften it, "is that Jun-hyuk's legal team has already submitted a motion to delay the waiver verification pending the genetic test. The judge assigned to the case has a history of granting those delays. Your current attorney, who I mean no disrespect to, has a caseload of 47 active files and filed your response brief with a formatting error that gives Jun-hyuk's team grounds to request a procedural extension." The café felt slightly smaller than it had a moment ago. "How do you know about my attorney's caseload?" I said. Do-hyun looked at me with calm, dark eyes. "I know about everyone's caseload." I believed him immediately and completely. "So what you're telling me," I said slowly, "is that my ex-husband, who has no legal claim to my pup, who has not contacted me in 8 months except to mock me in a café and file a harassment lawsuit, is currently winning on a technicality." "Currently," Jahan said. "Not permanently." "What does that mean?" "It means we have lawyers." He said it the way people say things that are simultaneously simple and enormous. "Good ones. The kind who do not have 47 other files and do not make formatting errors." I set my tea down. "Why?" I said. "Why would you do that? You don't know me." I translated one contract. I caught one error that doesn't explain this. The four of them did the micro-adjustment thing again. This time it lasted slightly longer. I felt something move through their shared emotional frequency. A current of something that was not quite a decision being made, because it felt like one that had already been made, earlier, before I was part of the conversation. Taesung leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his big hands loosely folded, his expression carrying that unguarded warmth that kept catching me off guard no matter how many times I felt it coming. "Can I ask you something first?" he said. "You can ask," I said. "I'll decide whether to answer." "Your ability." He said it simply, without drama, without the particular caution people usually used when they brought up secondary designation gifts. "How long have you had it?" I went very still. "How do you know about that?" I said quietly. "Your contract file had a secondary designation notation. Emotional sensitivity, advanced range." He held my have a younger brother, Omega. His gift is similar. Weaker range but same classification. Something moved through his expression, personal and careful. "I know what it costs, feeling everything all the time. Everyone's weather living in your chest whether you want it there or not." The back of my throat did the tight thing again. I hated it. I hated how easily he had found the exact right place to press, not manipulatively, not strategically, just honestly, the way people who have loved someone with a difficult gift learn to speak about it. Like it was real and hard and worth acknowledging instead of something to work around. 14, I said. I was 12 when it started, but I didn't understand what it was until I was 14. Taesung nodded. He did not say I'm sorry, or that must be hard, or any of the other things people said that were true, but landed like they were closing a door rather than opening one. He just nodded like I had confirmed something he already understood and let it sit between us with the respect it deserved. Jaehan watched this exchange. His emotional signature shifted, something warming under the controlled surface in a way that felt less like strategy and more like watching something that mattered to him and acknowledging quietly that it mattered. You felt us, he said. When we walked in, it was not a question. Yes, I said. What did you feel? I looked at him. At all four of them, spread around my corner booth in the old café in Nampadong. This pack that moved through the world like a single organism with four separate faces. And I thought about what I had felt when that door opened. Something I don't have a clean category for, I said honestly. Jaehan held my gaze. His emotional signature was doing the current thing, warm and certain, moving steadily. Neither do we. Do-young closed his phone completely, set it face down on the table, looked at me with those sharp eyes that had already calculated 17 things I had not said out loud and filed them all correctly. We're not asking for anything, he said. Not yet. We're offering something, legal support, contract security, and whatever else you need while you figure out what comes next. And in return, I said. Nothing, Jaehan said. That's not how anything works. No, he agreed. Usually it isn't. He reached into his jacket and placed a card on the table between us. Simple, heavy stock, a phone number and four names printed in clean type. But sometimes, he said quietly, something is just the right thing to do. I looked at the card, looked at the four of them, felt the pressure of their combined emotional signatures sitting in my chest like a chord that had not resolved yet. My pup shifted, slow and deliberate. I picked up the card. It was heavier than it looked. That was probably intentional. Everything about these four felt intentional. Every word placed, every silence chosen, every small action carrying the weight of something that had been thought through before it happened. I turned the card over once, nothing on the back. Just the four names on the front and a single number beneath them, the kind of number that did not belong to any one person but to all of them at once. I put it in my hoodie pocket. Okay, I said. Jan's expression did not change, but his emotional signature moved. A brief, warm current that he pulled back under control almost immediately, like someone who had let a feeling show in their face and smoothed it away before anyone could comment on it. I had commented on it internally. I kept that to myself. I'll need to review whatever your legal team prepares before anything gets filed, I said. I don't sign things I haven't read. We wouldn't expect otherwise, Do-yoon said. He had his phone back out, but he was actually working now, fingers moving efficiently, and I felt the focused, sharp energy of someone in their element. I'm sending our lead attorney your case file right now. She'll contact you within the hour. She's good? She once made a prosecutor cry in open court and then apologized so professionally that he thanked her for it. He did not look up. She's good. That's terrifying, I said. That's the point, he said. Taesung was watching me with that warm, steady attention that I was learning was simply how he existed in a space. Not performance, not strategy, just a person who was genuinely present in a way that most people were not. His emotional signature had settled into something quieter since the conversation about his brother. Something that felt like the particular piece of having said a true thing and had it received without damage. I understood that feeling. It was rare enough that I recognized it when I saw it from the outside. Your deadline, Yuchon said. I had almost forgotten about the translation. I looked at my laptop, at the document still open on the screen, and felt the specific panic of someone who has been distracted from a time-sensitive task by four extraordinarily compelling Mafia alphas and a bowl of jjigae. I have 4 hours, I said. It's fine. How many words remaining? Yuchon asked. About 3,000. Medical terminology, Japanese to Korean. It's detailed, but I know the source material. He nodded once, processing this, and then he picked up his coffee and walked from the counter to the table and sat down across from me with the quiet ease of someone who had decided to stay without making an announcement about it. I looked at him. He looked at me. I read Japanese, he said simply. I know you're not offering to do my work. I'm offering to read the source text aloud if your eyes are tired. He set his coffee down, faster than reading and typing simultaneously. I stared at him for a moment. My ability was doing something unhelpful, pulling threads of his emotional signature apart with the focused attention of someone trying to read a book in a language they mostly but not entirely speak. He was sincere. That was the clearest thread. Underneath the glass wall and the careful quiet was a person who was at this moment simply and genuinely trying to make something easier for me without requiring anything in return. I hated how disarming that was. If you mispronounce the pharmaceutical terminology, I'm not responsible for what happens, I said. Something behind his eyes warmed. Understood. So that was how I ended up sitting in a café in Nampadong, 5 months pregnant, translating a medical document with a Mafia Alpha reading source text quietly across the table while his three packmates existed around me, like weather I had not planned for and could not make leave. Jaehyun took the booth seat to my right, not close but present, and answered messages on his phone with the efficient, unhurried energy of a man who ran things without needing to perform the running of them. Occasionally, he would glance at the laptop screen, not reading my work, just checking. The way someone checks on a thing they have decided matters, without being asked whether it matters. Do-yoon had commandeered the table behind me and spread out what appeared to be case documents. Actual physical papers, covered in annotations in handwriting so small and precise it looked like a different language. He muttered occasionally, quiet and rapid, the sound of someone thinking faster than speaking. Taesung had gotten up at some point and come back with a plate of small sweet rice cakes that he set at the edge of my table without comment. When I looked at him, he just nodded at the translation on my screen with an expression that said, "Eat while you work and mind your own business about it," simultaneously. I ate one. It was good. The cafe moved through its late afternoon around us. The light through the windows shifted from white to the particular pale gold that Busan did in the hour before the streetlights came on. That specific quality of winter afternoon light that made everything look slightly more significant than it was. I was 300 words from finished when it happened. Do-yoon said quietly, from behind me, "Jaehyun," one word, the name carrying something in it that I felt before I understood what it meant. A frequency shift, small and sharp, the emotional equivalent of a warning light. Jaehyun's attention moved from his phone to the window. Taesung straightened. Yu-chan stopped reading mid-sentence, and his glass wall snapped back into place with an efficiency that told me this had happened before. This exact reordering of their collective attention, many times. I kept my eyes on my laptop screen. "Don't look toward the street," Jaehyun said. His voice had not changed volume or tone, but something underneath it had shifted, the careful neutrality of a man who was managing a situation. "There's someone outside," I said. "Yes, connected to you or connected to me." A pause, brief and telling. "We're not certain yet," he said, which meant it was possibly both. Which meant whatever these four men had walked into my life carrying, it was already closer to my door than I had understood when I put that card in my pocket 20 minutes ago. My pup went very still, not the rolling, comfortable stillness of sleep. The held stillness of a small creature that had felt something change in the air and was waiting to understand what it meant. I finished my translation, saved it, submitted it 6 minutes ahead of deadline. Then I closed my laptop, wrapped both hands around my cold tea, and said to Jaehyun without looking at the window, "I think it's time you told me what you actually walked into this cafe carrying." He looked at me for a moment. His emotional signature did the current thing, warm and certain, but underneath it now was something heavier, the weight of a truth he had been deciding how to deliver. "Yes," he said quietly, "I think it is." Jaehyun set his phone face down on the table. That small action hit the air with more weight than it should have. I had watched him handle his phone with the practiced ease of someone who was always reachable, always managing something, always one message away from a decision that affected more people than I would ever meet. Putting it down, fully face down, meant he was giving me something he did not give easily, his undivided attention. 3 weeks ago, he said, a man named Baek Sung-cheol was released from a federal holding facility in Seoul after a 14-month investigation that did not result in charges. I waited. Sung-cheol runs a network that moves things through the southern port corridor. Not cargo. Information, financial instruments. The kind of transactions that need to disappear into legitimate shipping documentation before anyone looks too closely. Jaehyun's voice was even, precise, delivering facts with the clean efficiency of someone who had told this story before but never carelessly. For the past 3 years, that documentation has passed through a rotation of translators. People with the right language combinations, the right clearance levels, and ideally the kind of financial situation that makes them easier to manage. The back of my neck went cold. 6 weeks ago, I said slowly, I translated a pharmaceutical contract for a company with 4 corporate shells and offshore accounts. Yes. And 2 months before that, I translated shipping manifests for a logistics company based in Incheon that had an unusual number of customs exceptions. Yes, and before that, Siwoo. Jaehyun said my name with a quiet steadiness that was not interruption so much as landing gear. You were not complicit. You translated legitimate surface documents. You had no access to what was underneath them and no reason to look. His eyes held mine. But Suncheol's network knows your name. They know your gift. And 3 days ago, one of his representatives made contact with our network asking whether we had a current relationship with you. The cafe felt very still around me. My ability registered the emotional texture of the room with painful clarity. Do-hyun behind me, sharp and focused, the particular tension of a man monitoring a threat. Tae-sung to my left, that warm protective frequency cranked up to something that was almost physical in its intensity. Yuchan across from me, glass wall fully locked, but the warmth behind it pressed close to the surface like it was trying to get out. And Jaehyun in front of me, carrying something heavy and honest and slightly anguished, the emotion of a man who knows that the truth he is delivering is going to cost the person receiving it something they were not prepared to spend. He wants to recruit me, I said. He wants to own you, Jaehyun said. There's a difference, and the person outside right now, one of his people, watching, assessing whether you're already connected to us or still available. Jaehyun's jaw tightened, a small controlled movement that his expression immediately smoothed over. When Junhyuk walked into this cafe today, it was not a coincidence. I went completely still. Explain that sentence, I said. Suncheol's network has been monitoring your location for approximately 10 days. Junhyuk filed the custody motion 11 days ago. Suncheol's legal contacts have a history of manufacturing personal pressure on targets they want compliant. Jaehyun held my eyes without flinching. We don't have confirmed proof yet that Junhyuk was directed to approach you today, but the timing and the method fit the pattern precisely. The room tilted slightly, not physically. The cafe was exactly where it had been. The pale gold light still coming through the windows, the barista still moving behind the counter, the last afternoon customers still existing in their ordinary Tuesday lives. But something in my understanding of the last 2 hours had just rearranged itself with a lurch that I felt all the way down. Junhyuk, standing over my table, his cruelty so practiced and familiar that I had filed it under old wound and not looked any further. You think he was sent to destabilize me, I said. Make me scared and isolated and more likely to accept help from wherever it came from. It's a standard approach, Do-hyun said, from behind me, his voice quiet and matter-of-fact. Manufacture a crisis. Present a solution. The person accepting the solution doesn't realize they've walked into a different problem, which is almost exactly what you four just did, I said. Silence. Not the comfortable kind. I felt it land in all of them simultaneously. The particular emotional impact of a fair point hitting people who had been hoping it would not be made. Do-hyun's sharp focus flickered. Tae-sung's warmth went complicated. Yuchan's glass wall developed a hairline fracture that he sealed almost instantly. Jaehyun did not look away. Yes, he said. That's a fair observation. Except, I said, he waited. Except I felt you walk in. I kept my voice level, working through it out loud because my ability was the one tool in this situation that belonged entirely to me. And I felt Junhyuk. I felt Junhyuk for 3 years. I know what manufactured pressure feels like from him because I spent a marriage learning every frequency of his cruelty. I looked at Jaehyun. You don't feel like him, I said. None of you do. Which doesn't mean you're not dangerous. It just means you're not lying to me right now. Something moved through Jaehyun's expression. Deep and real and not fully controlled. I felt it in his emotional signature at the same moment, a wave of something that had been held back, breaking its surface briefly before he pulled it back. We are dangerous, he said. I want to be honest about that. Being connected to us carries risk. Real risk, not manufactured, I know. And Suncheol is not a small problem. He has reach into the court system, into financial institutions, into networks that most people don't know exist until those networks have already decided something about them. I know that too. So knowing all of that, he leaned forward slightly. What do you want to do? I pressed my hand to my stomach. My pup was awake, not distressed, just present, his small movements steady and familiar against my palm. I thought about the custody filing, about my attorney with 47 cases and a formatting error, about Junhyuk standing over my table with his practiced cruelty and the possibility, now sitting in my chest like something swallowed wrong, that it had not even been entirely his idea. I thought about the card in my hoodie pocket. I thought about Tae-sung's brother and Yuchan reading source text across a table without being asked, and Do-hyun ordering the exact right food before I knew I needed it, and Jaehyun putting his phone face down to tell me the truth even though the truth was heavy and complicated and did not make his position easier. I said carefully, to go home, feed myself something that isn't barley tea and optimism, sleep, and tomorrow morning I want to talk to your attorney. Jaehan nodded. And I want to be clear about something, I continued. I am not a target to be protected, and I am not an asset to be managed. I am a person making a decision about who gets to be in my life, based on information that I am choosing to trust provisionally and will continue evaluating. Understood, Jaehan said. Good. I started packing up my laptop. Also, whoever is outside watching this cafe is feeling extremely bored right now and slightly anxious about a phone call he has to make. He's been there 40 minutes and his feet hurt. All four of them looked at me. My ability, I said pleasantly. It has a range. Do-hyun made that involuntary almost law sound again. This time he did not try to stop it. Do-hyun's almost law lasted approximately 1.5 seconds before his face reorganized itself back into its default expression of sharp professional composure. But I had felt it, the genuine amusement cracking through his controlled frequency like light through a shutter, bright and quick and completely unplanned. It did something to the air in the cafe. Not dramatic. Not the kind of shift you could point to and describe to someone who had not been in the room. But the four of them, this pack that moved through the world with the contained precision of men who had learned to show very little, recalibrated slightly around that small unguarded moment. And what the recalibration felt like, through my ability, was ease. Like something had been held at a particular tension for a long time and had been given brief permission to rest. I filed that away and kept packing my laptop. His name is Oh Gil-soo, Yuchan said quietly. The man outside. He drives a gray Sonata and he's been with Sung Cheol's network for approximately 8 months. Long enough to be trusted with surveillance. Not long enough to be trusted with anything that requires judgment. I looked at him. You got all that from me saying his feet hurt. I got all that from a file I pulled 40 minutes ago when we identified the vehicle. Yuchan held my eyes. You confirmed his emotional state. That's useful. It tells us he hasn't reported in yet. He's waiting until he has something definitive to say. Meaning he's not sure what he watched happen in here. Meaning you have time to leave before he decides. Yuchan stood, collected his coffee cup with the economy of movement that seemed to be his natural language. We'll take you home. I opened my mouth. Not a discussion, Tae-sung said, but gently, the word landing soft despite its content. Not because you can't handle yourself. Because there is a man outside who works for someone dangerous, and you are 5 months pregnant, and those are just the facts of the situation. I looked at him. He looked back with that open, steady warmth, and I felt underneath it the specific emotional texture of someone who was prepared to be argued with and had decided in advance that it would not change his position. Not stubbornness, conviction. There was a difference, and my ability knew it. Fine, I said. But I want it noted that I'm agreeing because it's logical, not because I need rescuing. Noted, all four of them said. I pulled on my coat, which had become a performance piece in the last month, given that it no longer fully closed across my stomach. I had developed a technique of holding it closed with one hand while carrying things with the other. A graceful system that worked until it didn't. Jaehan stood and without comment, without making it a moment, he simply reached out and held the left side of my coat closed while I zipped my laptop bag with both hands. I did not say anything. He did not say anything. My ability registered his emotional signature at close range for the first time, and it was different up close. The controlled surface was still there, but the current underneath was warmer and more present, the kind of warmth that had been accumulating over time rather than arriving suddenly. The emotion of someone who had been feeling something for longer than this afternoon and had been very disciplined about not acting on it until now. He released my coat the moment I had my bag. I cleared my throat. Thank you. The exit's better through the back, Do-hyun said, already moving. Less visibility from the street. The cafe's back exit opened into a narrow service alley that ran between buildings, the kind of Busan alleyway that smelled like salt air and old stone and food from the restaurants further down. A black vehicle was already idling at the alley's end, which told me someone had made a call I had not heard, which told me these four operated with a level of coordination that did not require visible communication. That should have been more alarming than I found it. I got into the vehicle. The four of them arranged themselves with the automatic efficiency of people who had shared confined spaces many times. Jaehan in front, Tae-sung beside me with deliberate space between us, Do-hyun behind his phone. Yuchan on my other side, close enough that I could feel the contained warmth of his presence without it being inappropriate, the careful distance of someone who was very aware of where his edges were. We moved through Busan's early evening streets, and I watched the city through the window and tried to organize what I was feeling into something I could work with. My ability was the problem. Not in the way it was usually a problem, the accumulated weight of everyone else's emotional weather living in my chest uninvited. This was different. This was 4 specific people whose emotional frequencies I had spent the last 2 hours reading in detail, whose feelings had shape and texture and history that I could trace now like a map I had not meant to memorize. And all 4 of those maps were currently pointed in my direction with a consistency that I could not explain away. I pressed my hand to my stomach. My pup had been quiet since the cafe. Not the held stillness of before, but genuine rest, the slow rolling ease of a small person who had absorbed a significant amount of secondhand emotional data through our bond and had decided to sleep through the processing of it. Smart kid. Can I ask something? I said to the vehicle generally. Yes, Taesung said. The custody filing, the pressure campaign. Sancho. I kept my eyes on the window. If I had not been in that cafe today, if Junyuk had not shown up, if you 4 had not walked in, what was the plan? For me specifically, silence. The particular quality of silence that means people are deciding not how to answer, but how much to answer. There was a meeting scheduled, Jaehan said from the front, for next week. A formal approach through your translation agency, offering me work, offering you a contract that would have created legal obligations that were significantly easier to enforce than to exit. His voice was even. By the time you understood what you had agreed to, the financial incentives would have been sufficient, and the personal pressure severe enough that leaving would have felt impossible. I thought about my refrigerator, the question mark eggs, the translation deadline, the attorney with 47 files. I thought about how close impossible had already been before today, before this car, before 4 men walked through a cafe door and changed the temperature of the room. That's terrifying, I said quietly. Yes, Jaehan said. And you walked into that cafe today because we were in Busan and you were in the system, and when Gilsu's vehicle showed up in the same block as your location this morning, we made a decision. To do what exactly? He turned then, just slightly, enough that I could see the line of his jaw and the edge of his expression in the rearview mirror. To make sure that when Sunchil's people looked at you, he said they saw someone who was already taken care of. The words landed in my chest with a weight I was not prepared for. Not because they were romantic, not because of what they implied about the 4 of them, or what any of this was becoming, but because taken care of, said in that quiet, certain voice by a man whose emotional signature I could read clearly enough to know he meant it without condition, was something I had not heard aimed at me in so long that my body did not know immediately how to metabolize it. My eyes stung. I looked at the window. Busan moved past in its early evening golden gray, the city I had lived in for 6 years, the city I had been surviving in for the last 8 months alone, and for the first time since the pregnancy test, came back positive in my tiny bathroom while my phone sat face down on the floor. I felt something crack open in my chest that was not grief. It was something quieter than relief and more dangerous than hope. Taesung's hand moved on the seat between us. Not touching, just close, available if I wanted it. I looked down at his hand and then up at his face. He was watching the window, giving me the privacy of his gaze being somewhere else, but his emotional signature was doing that warm, steady thing, the frequency of someone sitting with another person in a hard moment and not requiring anything from that moment except to be present in it. I did not take his hand, but I did not move away from the closeness either. Outside, Busan carried on, indifferent and beautiful and entirely unaware that something in me had just shifted quietly in the backseat of a black car on an ordinary Tuesday evening. Quietly enough that I could almost pretend it had not happened. Almost. The car stopped outside my building. It was not a remarkable building. 6 floors, older construction, the kind of place that had good bones and unremarkable everything else. I had chosen it because it was within budget and walking distance to the bus line, and the landlord had not asked too many questions about a single pregnant man paying 3 months upfront in cash. It looked exactly like what it was. A place someone was surviving in while they figured out what came next. I had never been embarrassed by it before tonight. I noticed that. Filed it under. Something to examine later when I was alone. Jane had the door open before I reached for the handle. Not in a performative way. Not with the particular energy of someone making a statement about care. Just practically, efficiently the way he did everything. Like it was obvious, and therefore required no announcement. I stepped out into the cold Busan evening. The salt air hit me immediately, the way it always did this close to the water. That specific Busan smell that had lived in the back of my throat for 6 years until it became indistinguishable from the smell of home. The street was quiet. A few people moving through the early evening cold. A Pojangmacha 2 buildings down with its orange tarp lit from inside and the particular smell of Teey.BL drifting up the block. Normal. Ordinary. The city entirely unbothered. All 4 of them had gotten out of the car. I looked at them standing on the pavement outside my unremarkable building in the cold evening air and felt the full weight of their combined emotional signatures settle into my chest with a clarity that 2 hours of proximity had sharpened past the point of easy dismissal. You don't all need to walk me to my door, I said. We know, Taesung said. None of them moved toward the car. I almost smiled. This is the part where I say thank you and we exchange professionally appropriate goodbyes, is it? Do-Hyun said, with the tone of a man who had reviewed the schedule and found it lacking. It should be. Probably, Jaehyun agreed. He was watching me with that controlled expression and that warm current underneath it, and I was tired, genuinely tired in the bone-deep way of a person who had been carrying too much alone for too long, and my ability was doing the thing where proximity to strong, consistent emotion started to dissolve the careful distance I maintained between other people's feelings and my own. I pressed my hand to my stomach. My pup had woken up during the drive, not urgently, just present. His small movements the slow, deliberate kind that meant he was awake and aware, and taking stock of his surroundings the only way he currently could. Through me, through what I felt, through the emotional weather. His existence was already perfectly tuned to read because he had been living inside my ability since before he had his own. He felt them. I knew he did, because what I felt from him in that moment was not the held stillness of caution or the rolling ease of comfort. It was something in between, something that had no clean name, the feeling of a small creature who had been in the cold for a long time turning toward something warm without yet knowing whether it was safe to move all the way in. My throat tightened. Siwoo. Jaehyun said my name the way he had in the car, quiet and certain, each syllable placed with the care of someone who understood that names were not neutral things. I looked at him. You've been doing this alone, he said, for a long time, longer than just the pregnancy. It was not a question. It was the kind of observation that lands differently when it comes from someone whose emotional signature you can read, because I felt the truth of it in him as he said it, the weight of knowing, the particular ache of recognizing in someone else a kind of sustained solitude you have seen up close before. Yes, I said. You don't have to keep doing that. Simple. Direct. No performance behind it, no strategy I could detect, no secondary current of manipulation running beneath the surface of the words. Just a man saying a true thing and meaning it completely. Something cracked open in my chest, not dramatically, not the way things crack in stories, loudly and with appropriate timing. Just a quiet internal fracture, the kind that happens when something that has been held under pressure for a very long time finally finds a direction to move. My eyes stung. I was not going to cry on a pavement in front of 4 Mafia alphas I had met 3 hours ago. I had a personal policy about this, and I intended to maintain it. Taesung stepped forward. He did not ask. He did not announce it. He just closed the distance and put his arms around me with the careful, deliberate gentleness of a man who had held someone in a hard moment before and understood that the quality of the holding mattered more than the words around it. I stood very still for exactly 2 seconds. Then something in me gave up arguing. I leaned into him and his arms adjusted, one hand at my back, one careful of my stomach, and the warmth of his emotional signature stopped being something I was reading from a distance and became something I was inside of, surrounding me from every direction, steady and real and asking absolutely nothing. I did not cry, that much I managed. But I breathed, actually breathed, for what felt like the first time since that positive test sat on my bathroom floor and the future became something terrifying instead of something mine. Jaehyun had moved closer, not touching, present. His emotional signature a warm wall at my left, steady as stone. Do-Hyun was behind him, his sharp, focused frequency doing something softer than I had felt from him all evening, something that felt like the emotion of a person who did not do tenderness easily, but was choosing it anyway because the situation required it. Yuchan stood at my right, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him, his glass wall down completely for the first time, and what was behind it was deep and certain, and so carefully contained that its release felt like a held breath finally let go. 4 emotional signatures, one direction. My pup moved, strong and definitive, the most purposeful movement he had made all evening, pressing outward toward the warmth like a small hand reaching for something just beyond its reach. Jaehyun made a sound I had not heard from him before. Low, involuntary, the sound of something catching a person off guard below the level of their control. His hand moved, slowly, and came to rest against my side, over where my pup had pressed outward. He did not ask permission, but I felt him want to. And I felt, in the split second before his hand made contact, that he already knew this was the moment everything changed. Not because he had planned it. Because it was true and he was a man who recognized true things even when they were inconvenient. My pup went still under his hand, not the caution stillness, not the listening stillness, the stillness of recognition. I looked up at Jaehyun. His expression had broken open, just at the edges, just enough that I could see what lived underneath the control, and what lived there was something I had no adequate word for, except that it felt ancient and certain and completely undeniable. "He knows," I said quietly. My voice barely held. "Yes," Jaehyun said. His voice was not much steadier. "So do we." Taesung's arms tightened fractionally. Do-hyun exhaled, slow and deliberate, the breath of a man releasing something he had been holding. Yuchan reached out and his hand found mine at my side, not gripping, just present. His fingers resting over mine with a warmth that asked nothing and offered everything. 4 alphas, 1 pavement. One cold Busan evening with Teey.BL on the air and salt in the wind, and my unremarkable building standing behind me, and the whole impossible weight of the last 8 months sitting in my chest alongside something new, something that had no category yet but was unmistakably alive. My pup kicked once more, decisive, definitive, like he had made up his mind before any of us had and was simply waiting for us to catch up. I laughed, a small broken sound that was more exhale than humor, and felt all 4 of them feel it, the warmth of it moving through their shared frequency like light through water. "Okay," I said to all of them, to none of them, to the cold evening and my own cracked open chest and the small life pressing against my ribs with all his newborn certainty. "Okay." Jaehyun's thumb moved, just once against my side. It was the smallest possible gesture. It landed like a promise. Behind us, up the street, a phone rang in a gray Sonata, and a man named Oh Gil-soo answered it, with the nervous energy of someone who had been waiting too long and had nothing clean to report, and I felt his anxiety spike from 40 meters away like a signal I was not supposed to receive. Whatever was coming, it was already moving. But right now, in this moment, on this pavement, with 4 alphas surrounding me like the walls of something being built, I was warm for the first time in 8 months. And my pup, my fearless, impossible, already opinionated pup, had gone perfectly, peacefully, completely still, like he had always known exactly where we were supposed to be. He had just been waiting for me to feel it too. And just like that, in a city that never promised him anything, Noh Siwoo stopped surviving and started being found. But Oh Gil-soo's call connected, and whoever answered it listened for a long time without saying a single word. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. That genuinely means everything. If this story made you feel something, if your heart moved even once, please subscribe because there is so much more where this came from. New stories, new packs, new omegas who are anything but ordinary. Hit that subscribe button and come find out what happens next in this world. We will be here, building something worth staying for.